Trigger warning. To answer the question why I walked away from my mother, it's because I had zero protection under my mother's roof or any of my other family members at that time. My mother actually isolated me from certain family members so they would have no say-so on what goes on with me. So when I later disappeared, they still had no clue I was actually gone until they actually saw me panhandling and things like that. But back to why I left my mother. My sister used to open up about a lot of things, and my mother was one of those people that would hear what's going on and reject it because she don't want to believe it's actually happening. So my sister told her that she was sexually assaulted when she was younger, and my mother's reaction was just the worst. So when I got sexually assaulted by a relative, I couldn't tell her. And then when I got sexually assaulted by one of my mother's friends, I couldn't tell her. I did go to one of my uncles, and he handled the situation so wrong. I didn't tell him in detail of who it happened with or where it happened, but his whole take on it was just stupid. In his mind frame, long as nobody entered me, I'm okay. According to him, since I was the one doing the entering and nobody entered me, I was A-okay. And that was so wrong, because it really messed up my view of sex before I even got to the age of where people normally start having it. But back to why I left my mother. Another woman my mother was friends with stayed a few houses down. Her son used to come over to our house because every time they had food stamps, because she had a lot of kids, they would bring some of their stuff over and stuff like that. So if we needed bread or something, we'll go to her. But she was also on drugs heavy, so her kids were kind of like all over the place too. And one of her sons was sexually assaulted by a male. And it created conflict between me and him, simply because he wanted me to tell his story to everybody so they would know what's happening to him. But I couldn't even tell my own story because I was afraid of the reaction I would get. So he would fight me and things like that because I wouldn't tell for him. And the guy who was doing this was taking advantage of the whole neighborhood because he knew it was low income and most of the mothers and dads were on that stuff. Around this time, I found my very first gun. My mother hates that part of the story because she knows that I did have a gun before I turned 9. But she could never find the gun, so it was always hid, which would have been a good reason for her to put me out. But moving on. The guy who was sexually assaulting most of the boys in the neighborhood became the head of the Boy Scouts. And guess who? It just became a Boy Scout. So technically, I was a Boy Scout, but only for one day. Because when what was told to me that happened to other little boys in the neighborhood by those little boys, I'm not about to let you get me too. And my grandmother was pissed off because my grandma had bought me a whole Boy Scout uniform and everything else. And I was only there one day. Anytime my mother tried to send me to the gymnasium to go to the Boy Scout program, I was always sick or I just left because there was no way in hell I was going to get sexually assaulted again. And the way my uncle made it, I wasn't supposed to get sexually assaulted by a dude at all, even though gender doesn't change trauma.